Hey there folks, this is Pop Culture, I'm Alex Pop, and now that I've gotten all of the squeeing out of my system, it's time for me to talk in detail about the first trailer for Jurassic World Dominion. Historically, we would have gotten this trailer back in late November to early December, somewhere in that frame, but it's obvious at this point that the online release of the Jurassic World Dominion prologue replaced it. This likely means that we'll be getting only one more trailer, probably in April, as opposed to the usual three. But knowing the nature of the marketing for Fallen Kingdom, this may be for the better. What's puzzling is that upon the online release of the prologue, it was announced that that 5 minutes of footage is no longer part of the movie, hence it being given the title Jurassic World Dominion: The Prologue. Which is really strange because in the trailer we do see a few shots from the prologue. So, is it part of the movie or not? I do kind of like the idea of the movie opening with the very moment that the 65 million years worth of making this adventure began, but on the flip side, the prologue does work on its own as a little Jurassic short story. It's a manifestation of Ian Malcolm's words to Ellie Sattler about chaos theory and the butterfly effect. How something as seemingly insignificant as a mosquito drawing blood from an animal leads to all that chaos and terror eons later. So whether it's part of the movie or not, I'm honestly fine either way, but whatever the case, let's start getting into the rest of it. I absolutely loved this trailer, and there is tons for me to unpack, so let's get into it. The first major plus to this trailer, no robots, not a single Brad to be seen, so immediately, that's a great start. Camp Cretaceous Season 4 left a rancid stain in my mind, and I could sure use this movie as the bleach that gets rid of it. As for what we do see, I want to start by addressing the text that appears in this trailer, "Experience the epic conclusion of the Jurassic saga." This has sparked a lot of debate among people as to whether or not this is the absolute last we'll ever see of this whole universe, but I can tell you for sure it's not going to be. For one, Jurassic is just too profitable of a franchise for Universal to just let go of. And for another, Frank Marshall has already said that this movie is going to mark the beginning of a new era. But what I really love about the trailer is that it's drawing more emphasis on the fact that it's also the end of an era. There will be some spin-offs and whatnot, I'm sure, but the point is, this is going to be the conclusion of the core six-picture story. It's going to wrap up all the stories of all of the lead characters we're getting in this movie. And what draws even more emphasis to this is the audio that the trailer opens with. We hear the echoing words of John Hammond from the first Jurassic Park when he's talking about what his dream with the park was. This is significant as it all started with him, and now this is what it's all amounting to. For better or for worse, his dream is the reason for all of this. And as we hear those words, the first thing we see is Owen and two other guys on horseback rounding up a herd of Parasaurolophus in the Sierra Nevadas. According to Colin Trevorrow, they are relocating the herd to get them out of danger of being poached. And this I did already observe when we got this screenshot a little while ago of Owen and this one Parasaurolophus, but the imagery here is just incredibly photorealistic. Seems that all that extra time that the VFX artist got really paid off. It then goes to one of two moments in this trailer that hit me on an emotional level, and that is Macy standing among this group of construction workers who are all staring up in awe at the Apatosaurus. I can only imagine that she spent these last 4 years, a good 1/3 of her childhood, feeling so much guilt for what she did at the end of Fallen Kingdom, feeling at least partial responsibility for what the world has been coming to, and that has just gotta be heavy stuff for a kid. So what this moment seems to suggest is that, not knowing how to make peace with herself, she finds it therapeutic to try and draw her attention to what she saved. We then see that Blue now has a hatchling that she's training to hunt, and this tells us that Blue reproduces asexually. We can tell this from, one, the fact that there's no father around, and the confirmation of this is that the baby looks identical to her. She even drops by outside of Owen's now finished cabin, and it's at this point that we hear a discussion between Claire and Owen, where we hear Claire say that they can't keep her here forever, and Owen says, if they find her, we're never going to see her again. Now, we are being led to believe that they're talking about Blue here, but I tend to think that they're actually referring to Macy. I mean, I don't think they are keeping Blue there. They all seem to have accepted that she was going to live free at the end of Fallen Kingdom. And this discussion would make sense referring to Macy, because naturally there are going to be people out there who see only her value as a human clone. They see her value to them just as biogenetic scientists. What's weird to me is that for the most part, this trailer does align with the plot that leaked shortly before production began, but the one aspect that it seems to disprove is Macy being abducted by Biosyn. Considering the number of times that we see her with the other heroes in this trailer, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, at least not towards the beginning of the movie. What it appears instead is that it's Blue and her baby who are taken captive by Biosyn, and that's what sends Claire and Owen on this adventure. So why then is Macy coming with them? Well, two possibilities. One, they simply don't want to leave her alone, but then again, that would be getting her into potential danger, some of which involves people who very likely want to experiment on her or something. So what I think is more likely is that Macy thinks that maybe out there's something that she can do to atone for that move that she made at the end of Fallen Kingdom, after feeling all this guilt for what the world is now coming to, as small of a part that she played. But Claire and Owen insist to her that it wasn't her fault, that she was a victim of circumstance, and that it's all up to them to try and find this balance between dinosaur rights and human safety. So they intend to leave her behind, but Macy, feeling such an urge to try to find peace with herself, she takes a page from Kelly Curtis and sneaks onto the trip. That would be my best guess. Whatever the case, I am glad that she's going to be getting a decent amount of screen time in this movie. Now, I did figure that Biosyn was going to be having Blue in captivity, but I started to wonder if they were just going to ignore what Fallen Kingdom established, that it was so hard for people to capture Blue that they needed one of her former trainers in order to do so. So I started to wonder if they were going to bribe Biosyn into helping them out with that, but it became apparent that that wasn't the case when we saw a photo of Omar Sy on the Malta set. But I am glad that it looks like they are sticking to the rules that Fallen Kingdom established, because Biosyn takes advantage of Blue's less experienced offspring, luring her into a trap, allowing them to easily capture both of them. Moving on, we see a slightly extended version of the shot that the IMAX footage ended with, and that was the Mosasaurus getting its mouth around a cage full of fish and pulling the entire boat onto its side in a really nice camera move. We then arrive at the second moment that just hit me right in the feels, just had my heart giving such a great leap. I mean, what can you say? What Jurassic Park fan doesn't just melt to the floor when they see Dr. Ellie Sattler reuniting with Dr. Alan Grant? It's just so great to see these two again after 21 years. And I gotta say, Sam Neill is looking great for a 72-year-old fart. And what's really intriguing about the setting here is that it's still at Dr. Grant's paleontology site. And I have expressed skepticism at the notion of him starting here in this movie. I was hoping for a version of Dr. Grant who had changed over the past 20 years. But I will say, if it's going to start with him still with his mind wrapped up in paleontology and he just feels such an attachment to it that he really can't seem to let it go on his own, I am glad that it's Ellie Sattler who is pulling him out of it again. That it's her who is going to help him find ways that he can put his dinosaur knowledge to more good use, to be more contributive to the changing world. That is where his character was going in the first movie. And I do understand why his character was the way he was in the third movie, and maybe I'll do a separate video explaining that in the future. But one thing is for absolute certain, and I cannot stress this enough, this movie needs to deliver the payoff to what he says to Lex in the first movie.
What are you and Ellie gonna do now if you don't have to pick up dinosaur bones anymore?
I don't know, I guess. Guess we'll just have to evolve too.
And speaking of lines from past films that could come full circle in this movie, I think about this one that Alan says to Eric Kirby in Jurassic Park 3.
She was the one person I could always count on. I owe her a lot. Well, I don't think I ever told her that.
You should.
You know, Alan, just a thought, this adventure might be your chance. So after Ellie's invitation to Alan to come with her on this journey, we then go to a swampland environment where we see the Therizinosaurus slowly following Claire, who is crawling on the ground, I guess because of injuries from the plane crash that we see later in the trailer. This is a pretty intense moment, and what I'm really interested to see is what exactly the behavior of the Therizinosaurus will be like. It is classed as an herbivore, but will it be a really territorial beast that will slash you up like Freddy Krueger? Or is it starting out in a deceivingly intimidating manner, but it turns out it's a more peaceful creature, sort of the opposite of the Dilophosaurs? And during some other footage, including Dr. Henry Wu rocking some shaggy hair, as well as a sweeping aerial shot of what is most likely Biosyn's man-made dinosaur habitat with Dr. Grant looking on. And let me just say, I'm glad we at least got one shot of Dr. Grant with his hat on. And during this time, we hear Ian Malcolm say, "We're racing toward the extinction of our species. We not only lack dominion over nature, we're subordinate to it." Now, Colin Trevorrow has spoken before about how the structure of this movie is somewhat unconventional. It starts with two separate stories that draw close together before colliding, I'm guessing maybe halfway or so into the film. But what I'm wondering is, how does Ian Malcolm join, I'm guessing, probably Alan and Ellie, before they join up with Claire, Owen, and Macy? The trailer is hinting at reasons for why the other five are on this adventure, but with Ian Malcolm, they're not even being so much as vague about it, like what is getting him deep in the action here. So I just really hope that they're not trying to find some really poor excuse for why he's going with them just because, nostalgia bait. Now, another screenshot that was released a month ago had Owen and DeWanda Wise's character, who we now know as the pilot Kayla, who are standing with small weapons ready to fight something. And we now know that that something is the Pyroraptor. And I have to say, this is one of the things that I'm a little more iffy on in this trailer. I understand the reason for feathers, but I just want to feel like I'm seeing a dinosaur. I don't really want to be given the illusion that I'm just seeing a bird with sharp teeth. And it's the wings that are kind of doing that for me. So I guess you could say you would not find me on the tail of that Pyroraptor. That is to say, I'm not a fan. We then see a shot of Sattler in sort of an updated version of her wardrobe from the first movie, and behind her in the background is presumably her daughter, who was just a baby in Jurassic Park 3. And right after this, we're treated to what is definitely the most curious shot in the trailer, a couple of kids running away from what appears to be a huge swarm of giant bugs. Is that what that is? I mean, it does make sense that if they're finding mosquitoes in amber, they would easily come across other prehistoric insects trapped in amber, and they would be very easy to resurrect. And while I have absolutely no idea what's up with those bugs, I am coming to the conclusion that based on where Sattler is and the fact that she isn't with any of the other heroes in this scene, something tells me that this is the point where she senses that something is up with Biosyn, and recruits Alan Grant to go along on this investigative mission with her. We then get several shots of a chase sequence in Malta involving the dinosaur that the leaks told us was Deinonychus. However, it is in fact a Troceraptor. There are 4 of these creatures created by Biosyn, I'm guessing inspired by Owen's research on raptors, and they all have the names of Red, Tiger, Panthera, and the albino one is named Ghost. Claire makes a big jump from one building to another with one Atrociraptor on her tail, and 2 more chase Owen through the streets, and at one point we see one of them running after him while on a narrow ledge, which really showcases just how unbelievably agile these new raptors are. The part that really blew my mind was when it went from this small-scale chase with the raptors, and then suddenly the scenery just opens up and we see a Carnotaurus and Allosaurus walking through the road. So since it has been established that this movie is not going to feature dinosaurs invading cities, this is obviously a breakout of some kind. Anyway, we're then treated to the plane crash scene that we've known for a while was coming, but didn't know exactly how it was going to play out. Now we know that it's the gigantic Quetzalcoatlus that takes the plane down, and looking at that thing, it has to be my favorite design for a new creature in this movie that we've seen as of yet. I remember coming across this illustration in a book of the sauropod Alamosaurus clearing the way for this Sky King, and I was awestruck at the intimidating size of it. So I'm glad that we're going to see it in more of the movie than just the prologue, whether or not the prologue is actually part of the movie. From there we see flashes of other scenes, like a herd of Nasutoceratops flipping over vehicles that I'm guessing belong to Biosyn, and a shot of Claire and Ellie looking through the window of a door to a control room. And one I really like is of Owen with a gun and Grant with a crowbar or something, both taking a protective stance in front of Macy, who is still standing ready behind them. I have to say, aside from only John Hammond, my two favorite characters in this whole series are Dr. Grant, I know, big surprise, but I'm also going on record to say that the other is Macy. So to see Dr. Grant there protecting her, it just really warms my heart. And at the same time, this shot is just, pardon my language, badass. And among this montage, we also see what is, in my opinion, the most intense shot in the trailer, where we see Macy climbing up a ladder that is surrounded by a protective cage that I'm guessing is probably built for a situation such as hers. And that shot is, no doubt, the one that had all the reductionists salivating over the thought of her getting a taste of her own medicine. Reportedly, though, behind the scenes, the Giganotosaurus here is the giant animatronic that they built. Man, had to have been such a scary stunt to pull off. Chris Pratt sure didn't nickname Isabella Sermon the Kid Rock for nothing. We then come to the part that had me flipping out the most. Jurassic World Dominion is seeing the long overdue return of the Dilophosaurus. What took so long, man? This has been one of my favorite creatures in the series ever since I watched the first movie for the first time, and I was really disappointed that we never got to see it again. But here it is now in its full frill-springing glory, and all I can say is, Claire better dart out of the way immediately or she's getting a mouthful of poison. And the Dilo that we see here is also an animatronic, and while the thing that stands out about it the most is the different coloration than what we've seen before, the other thing I'm noticing is the size of the head in comparison to a person. I don't think this is the full 20-foot size as what we find in the fossil record, but it does appear to be substantially bigger than those curious little critters that we saw in the first movie. And topping it all off with perhaps the greatest moment in this whole trailer, the legacy characters and the new standing together facing down the biggest of the big, the Giganotosaurus. And it's evidently mistaken to be a T-Rex before it emerges from the woods.
Don't move.
You were expecting someone else?
And then we end it all with this really good meta line from Malcolm.
Bigger. Why do they always have to go bigger?
Well, at this point, the question is not why, but why not? Now, considering the fact that Kayla is featured in this final shot, it leads me to believe that they're building her up to have a role in this movie that is comparable to the rest of the Big Six. Because she's the only one of the 7 leads who is not a previously established character, this did make a thought cross my mind. Now, I don't want to start a frenzy or anything like that in the comments, just hear me out. I do get irritated when people jump to conclusions about a movie based on the mere presence of a person of color. I definitely don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, because we know next to nothing about this new character. However, film studios are aware that there is always going to be that minute group of people who could not care less about who these characters are or seeing their stories get wrapped up, and are just going to complain that the lead cast is too white. So the thought did cross my mind that they might just be throwing in DeWanda Wise into the lead cast just to appease those people, but really, there is no appeasing those people, and frankly, I wish that film studios would stop trying. Again, though, don't want to get too far ahead of myself. She may very well be an excellent character who contributes a lot to the story. When you get down to it, what I really just hope is that, when I see Ian Malcolm, I don't see, nostalgia bait or anything. And when I see Kayla, I hope that I don't just see diversity quotas. I ultimately hope that all of these characters do have a legit reason for being present on this adventure. And I think most of you can agree that that is a pretty reasonable expectation. So that just about wraps up all my thoughts on this trailer. I thought it was excellent, and I do think that it did, for the most part, what it needed to do. Just give us some hints of character motivation, get us interested in what these characters are up to, while also delivering on hints of dinosaur action in the process. I do kind of feel that maybe it would have been better if they saved more of, Grant and Sattler scenes for the second trailer, maybe ended off with their reveal.
You didn't come out all this way just to catch up now, did you?
You coming or what?
Other than that, I do think that this trailer, for the most part, did what it had to do. And I hope that when we get to the second trailer, which I'm guessing will probably give us a few more details about like Biosyn and give us the reveal of Louis Dodgson, I hope that it does stay the course there. So let me know your thoughts on anything I've said or any additional thoughts that you have on this trailer in the comments below. We're just 4 months away, and I am so excited to experience the epic conclusion of the Jurassic saga. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this trailer analysis video. Like and share, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop.